So academics in psychology don't trust each other and don't trust themselves, and it's all because of psychology's overarching approach to doing science. And in this video, I'll explain how all of that happens. So over the years, there have been many times when I've seen psychologists working as academics in higher education both show a lack of trust in the professionalism of their colleagues and a lack of trust in their own professionalism. And it's odd to see. In all other respects, they take great pride in their professionalism and talk about the importance of maintaining professional standards. But in one area, they appear to conclude that their own professionalism is lacking. But more confusingly, they appear to see this as something that doesn't need to be addressed, other than to come up with some clever workarounds for it. And what's even more curious is that they speak openly about it, and they don't appear embarrassed about it at all. So what is this thing? Well, it's marking. It's marking student work, specifically when they mark dissertations undertaken by honours students. These are students who have completed their undergraduate degree in psychology and take their first year of postgraduate study, which involves them developing a research project, conducting the project, and writing it up in a form of a dissertation. And this is work that's marked internally in the psychology department. It's unlike master's and PhD research, where the work is sent out to external markers, because in those higher degrees, the work needs to be scrutinised by the broader academic community. With honours students, they aren't expected to be testing out their skills in regard to producing work to be reviewed by that broader academic community, such as through publications. But they're still, and it's because they're still in that process of developing their research skills. There is a push, though. There is a push encouraging honours students to publish their work, which I think is a mistake. And I won't talk about that in this video. I can make a separate video on that if you like. Leave me a comment below in the description box if you want me to do a video on that. But the problem I want to talk about is the marking problem. So I'll tell you what's going on. An honours student, they work on their research project under close supervision of an academic who advises the student on such things as what literature they should read, what methods they should use, what analysis they should undertake, and how they should write up their research. It's the most directive form of research supervision in the postgraduate training of psychologists. And that's because students are not yet believed to have learnt the research skills to undertake work independently. Another reason for more directive supervision is that the research, particularly in psychology, often involves human subjects. So with the honours student being at an early stage in developing their professional research skills, they're often supervised quite closely to make sure that the student doesn't make bad choices that might negatively impact on their research participants. And we kind of expect them to take a few wrong turns, because they're still learning. But we as supervisors are there to make sure those wrong turns don't end up in disaster. Now, all of that is perfectly fine. The problem comes when students' work gets marked. So as I said, the work's marked internally, but it's become increasingly common for someone in the psychology department other than the supervisor to mark the work. And that's unusual. Most times academics mark the work of their students, the students that they teach. But here, for honours students and an honours project, the supervisor is prohibited from marking their students' work. And the reason for this is because the supervisor is believed to be too close to the student to be able to exercise an objective evaluation of the student's work. Now, there are a whole load of problems around the notion of objectivity and the degree to which any marking can be undertaken objectively. And I talk about that in a previous video on the problems with marking student work. This one here, if I've put the image in correctly, over there. I'll put a link to it below. I know that's below. I'll put it in the description box below. So I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. So have a look at that video if you want to see me talking about whether you can mark work objectively, university work objectively. What I want to talk about in this video is that issue of marking honours work. Essentially, the argument that's made is that the supervisor is not allowed to mark their students' work because it's believed they will be swayed in their marking by their personal liking or disliking of their student. Essentially, the claim here is that the supervisor is believed to be unable to act professionally because they've worked too closely with their student. And what's been operationalized here is a definition of professionalism that's tied to this idea of maintaining objectivity. And in this instance, the academic psychologist is not believed to be able to maintain objectivity. Now, that's really odd. It's very, very odd. It's very odd for psychologists not to trust each other's ability to maintain objectivity. And that's because mainstream psychology largely operates in a research paradigm that requires psychologists to maintain an objective position in their research activities. So you should be pretty good at this stuff. And it's really odd because the role of a professional is to be aware of and manage situations like that. As a professional, you often take on line management responsibilities where you're expected to get to know the staff you're managing, to provide them with guidance and supervision, and also to have a role in appraising their performance. And to do all of that while maintaining objectivity, not to be swayed by your personal liking or disliking of that person you're supervising. And it's really, really odd because much of psychology, and when I say much, I mean the dominant areas of clinical and counseling psychology, much of psychology works on the basis that psychologists can act professionally through developing a close, in this case, therapeutic relationship with the people they work with their clients. They're trusted not to base their assessment of their clients or base their treatment plans for their clients on whether they like their client or not. We trust them to exercise professional judgment there, but we don't trust those same psychologists to assess a piece of work a student produces because they have a close supervisory relationship with their student. Indeed, that supervisory relationship is expected to be much less intimate in terms of students sharing their emotional lives than that psychologists have with their clients in a therapeutic setting. Now, the comeback here is that the professionalism of the honours supervisor is not questioned. It's just that they're ensuring the optics look good, that there can be no criticism made of the supervisor that they were subjective, that they didn't maintain their objectivity, and no criticism could be leveled at the supervisor for being subjective because they were removed from the marking. Now, that suggests that we might readily and rightly question the professionalism of the supervisor. Removing the supervisor from marking the student's work gives credence to the doubt about their professionalism. We're entertaining that possibility. Yes, they could be acting unprofessionally, so we'll remove them. It's a lack of faith in the professionalism of psychologists. Now, let's get onto that in a second. First, I want to dig deeper into this notion of professionalism. Now, lots of people define professionalism in lots of different ways, and there's no one way of defining it, and the literature is full of competing definitions, but central to most definitions is that a professional is someone who has specialized and highly developed skills that require a prolonged period of academic preparation. And many academics are professionals by virtue of that. Typically they hold doctoral degrees in a niche area of psychology. And you can see that encoded into codes of ethics and codes of conduct for professional psychologists. These are developed by professional associations of psychology, where they say, they mandate that working outside of your area of expertise is unprofessional. So as such, academic staff are often supervising student research projects that are connected to their area of specialism. And sometimes, quite often, they're the only person in the department who's expert in that particular area. And that's because typically psychology departments focus on recruiting staff who have different specialisms within psychology, so that the department can deliver a full psychology curriculum, which covers a broad base of the discipline. You know, this is something that psychology accreditation bodies require them to do, to cover a broad base of the discipline. So that's why they have all of these specialists, because we're all specialists in these different areas across the discipline. So here we have our first big problem. The one person who likely has the expertise in the area of research the honours student has undertaken, or likely to be the only person to have that level of expertise on that topic, is the person who's not allowed to assess that student's research because of a concern that they might not be able to mark it objectively. And this could perversely lead to psychologists acting unethically because they end up marking work outside of their area of expertise. They have to mark the student of some other supervisor, and that other supervisor is working in a specialist area that's very different to them. So they're marking a piece of work that really they don't have expertise on. And we have another big problem. The person who's brought in to mark the work will have very little, often no insight into the nature of the supervision the student has had. Now, there are two worrying consequences of this. First, a student can follow the advice of their supervisor and do a particular thing, but receive a poor grade from the person who ends up marking their work because that person holds a different opinion as to whether that thing was a good thing. And the chances of that happening increases when that marker does not have specialist knowledge related to the student's area of research. Second, when an honours thesis is marked, typically the higher marks are given to students who were able to make good choices for themselves. So they were able to act quite independently because they had the skills to do so. You know, the choices they were making were good choices, and they didn't need any intervention from the supervisor. We want to acknowledge those students by giving them high grades because they're clearly really good at doing research, but we can't give them high grades because the person marking the work doesn't know what the nature of that supervision was. So we've got ourselves into this sorry mess. And how did we end up here? Well, I'd say it's because of psychology's overindulgence with positivism, that scientific paradigm that positions objectivity as the key mode of operation. I'd say that psychology is so wedded to this area of objectivity that results in us besmirking the reputation of our colleagues and ourselves, and risks subjecting student work to an ill-informed and somewhat perilous system of marking, because we can't cope with having a supervisory relationship with a student and assessing that student at the same time, a kind of basic skill that most professionals seem to be able to do without much of a problem. And becoming blinded by this notion of objectivity means that we lose focus on those other key qualities we associate with professionalism. Actually, the more important qualities, such as not working outside of your expertise or competence, but also to issues such as maintaining personal integrity, which means to have developed a strong and transparent set of morals and values that are beneficent, focused on doing good in the world, and to be principled in your work, such that your work consistently aligns with those morals and values. And as such, professionalism isn't about maintaining objectivity, but it's about maintaining a transparent, accountable, and value-driven subjectivity. Professionalism requires that our subjectivity, our morals, and our values inform our work, not that our subjectivity should be disaggregated from our work and pushed away. Now, you can see this importance of subjectivity in various professional codes of ethics for psychologists. And I'll pick out the ones in the US, UK, and Australia as examples. So the 5 general principles of the American Psychological Association's Code of Conduct are beneficence and non-maleficence, which means, doing social good and doing no social harm. Fidelity and responsibility, which is about being faithful to your beliefs or to a social cause. Integrity, which is about being true to your own value system. Justice and respect for people's rights and dignity, which is about valuing human diversity. So it's not about maintaining an objective, removed stance to the world. It's about maintaining a partisan, subjective, engaged stance. It's about being value-driven. In the UK, the British Psychological Society, the key principles behind their ethics code are respect, competence, responsibility, integrity. The Australian Psychological Society, they're presently developing a code of conduct, and they're somewhere between a code of conduct and a code of ethics. It's complicated anyway. They're shifting from one to the other. So it's all a little bit in development at the moment. But the existing code of ethics, which is still binding the work of professional psychologists, says that you have to have respect for the rights and dignity of people and peoples. Propriety, that's another way of saying competence. And integrity. And all these lists are very similar, but the notion of competence is put front and centre in the BPS and the APS, in the British and the Australian ethics codes. The APA, the American code, they've got a whole section on competence, so it's there. It's very much there. So they have a whole section on competence in their code of conduct. Now, this focus on competence is an explicit mandate that psychologists should not work outside of their area of expertise. The thing that arguably is put at risk by this weird practice of supervisors being disallowed from marking their students' work and having it marked by someone else who may not have that specialist knowledge in the area that the student's been working in. Okay, that's enough of my rant. That's all for now. If you disagree with what I've said, great. Got a different take on this? Great. Just leave a comment, let me know. But also, whether you disagree with me or agree with me, irrespective, just click the thumbs up, because my ego is fragile. And I may not come back and make another video. That might mean you won't give me the thumbs up. Just give me the thumbs up, please. Be nice to me. It helps my video get a little bit of traction. Okay, so till next time, ta-da.